Hi, I'm Robbin Miller, and this is my 20th anniversary show, and my guest today is Joe Belleal, Vice President of Youth Services and Public Affairs at Easter Seals, correct?
That's right.
And Michael Kennedy is the Advocacy and ADA Coordinator, Center for Living and Working. Did I say that right?
Close. ADA Access Advocacy Coordinator.
The 3 A's.
Yep, 3 A's.
Well, I welcome back Joe and Mike. They have been on over the last, well, actually 20 years on my show at different times.
2 decades.
2 decades.
Wow.
Yes, we're a
Wow.
little older, a little grayer, maybe a little achy, but we're happy and in good shape and still advocating for people with disabilities, correct?
All the time.
All the time. It doesn't stop. 20 years ago, the issues that you want to talk about today is still present.
And there's so many of them.
There's so many. I mean, some progress has been made in terms of awareness.
Oh, absolutely. Much more awareness. And then part of that's with social media, internet. A lot of information being shared and things within disability community.
Yeah, as the baby boomers age and Generation X, which I think we're all under, Generation X, people born from 1965 to 1972.
Baby boomer.
I'm a boomer.
You a boomer?
Right.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so they're the tail end.
Right on the
at
cusp.
the end.
That's only 7 years they put us in. Millennials is 1980 to 2000? I don't know. Then you have Gen Zs after 2000. So, getting back to why we're here today, why don't we talk about transportation that you wanted to talk about?
Transportation's there's a lot of advocacy going on in regards to transportation in the Worcester area. And one of the things is just what's happening around us. We have a lot of Uber, Lyft, we have these new kind of companies coming in. One of our concerns about that is to have accessible vehicles out there, so somebody using a wheelchair can actually have a lift to get inside. And it kind of reminds us about the taxi cab companies when we were advocating for medallions for accessible taxis in Worcester. And the result of that ended up with 2 accessible taxis in Worcester for a number of years. Red Cab had those. But more recently, we've heard about Uber and Lyft and doing on-demand trips, and they're close to 1 million trips now in just the Worcester area alone.
Yep,
And
Worcester and surrounded towns.
Wow.
the problem is none of them have been wheelchair accessible, not one of 1 million. And so we're concerned about that. People using scooters, people using manual chairs, power chairs, want to be able to get around like everybody else. They're very, And if you go to other places, I was in Washington, D.C. last month, and I used an Uber there. They had wheelchair accessible Ubers. They had 30 of them. And yeah, Washington's bigger, but still, what's the second largest city in the area? And it also opens up new areas like Shrewsbury. And Shrewsbury has limited public access.
Yes.
I mean, you have the Council on Aging, okay, but you have a fixed route, but it's not going everywhere.
No.
There are people that have called me before from Shrewsbury going, how do I get to work every day and things like that? What are my options? How do I get to different sections? And I think that's something that, again, it's part of the whole transportation game.
Well, it is an ongoing issue. Now, if I understand Uber, that's privately owned, is that correct?
Uber and Lyft, yeah, they're actually recently publicly traded companies.
So they're on the stock market?
They're on the stock, both of them, yeah.
Ah, but aren't some of their owners are not only in the United States but overseas, right? In other countries? Isn't Lyft the one owned by another country, or they joint American?
I'm not sure who owns percentages, but
Right.
now you can buy them on the stock market if you want. I know there were a lot of different investors.
Was it Uber that just originally, just recently had their IPO?
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, so are they required to be accessible? That's the
That's
question.
a good question. There are lawsuits out there right now. Some people feel that under like the ADA, that they have a business, they're open to the public. They should
Good idea.
should be at least reasonably accessible. And if they're doing 1 million trips, is it unreasonable to have a small percentage at least be accessible trips?
Right. Joe, what's their logic behind it? Is it because all their drivers are private contractors?
Well, more they're saying that they're not a transportation company; they're a software company.
Software.
Yeah.
Oh, because of the app.
Yeah, and that's what they are. They're the software. Their drivers are all consultants, if you will. They're the ones that are actually doing, they're the drivers. They're their own company. And so, yeah, so that's what they're saying, and that's what they're hiding behind on that.
But in Washington, they're contractors too, the Uber drivers.
So the Uber I took, again, Uber's doing different things.
Okay.
In Boston, they have I think the program in Boston is supposedly the one that people are really looking at as an example,
Okay.
the model to expand. The Uber that I took in Boston, in Washington, D.C. last month was an Uber taxi. So it was a taxi cab, it was an Uber, and they also did contracted governmental trips for people. Like they would sometimes do Medicaid trips, or they would do state-related trips. They had contracts with that, but they also were a regular taxi cab, and they were also an Uber vehicle. When they returned Uber, they just got the phone, hit the button, boom, they're Uber.
Joe, what kind of vehicle was the DC Uber?
I want to say it was like a Dodge Caravan.
Oh, okay, so it was
Rear
a
entry.
minivan. Okay,
Yeah.
yep, all right.
Yeah, person really nice. They got in there because I was asking him questions about it. So
They should follow the same model here then. Like they have in
So-
DC, follow here in Worcester then?
I think the one in Boston is what I've heard, because I've talked to Lyft people as part of we have a
Right.
transportation advocacy coalition that Mike and I are part of in Worcester, where it has a number of different organizations and people, riders, people with disabilities, older adults involved, and we've been kind of monitoring a lot of different issues. And so part of that is we want to promote more accessible, available, affordable transportation options for
Okay.
people. And that includes, Uber and Lyft and other vehicles being, having some being wheelchair accessible. And so in Boston, they have two things. They have, one, Uber and Lyft have increased the amount of accessible vehicles that they have, out there. But they've also have done a pilot program with their paratransit services, the Ride in Boston.
Yes, right.
And so we'd like to see them do something like that in Worcester, do a pilot program with our paratransit to give people who are on paratransit services, ADA eligible, American Disabilities Act eligible riders in Worcester, the option to be able to do on demand once in a while.
Okay.
I mean, why should a person with disability not have the option of being spontaneous? I mean, everybody else can decide, I'm going to go to movies today. If you're a person with disability who relies on 88 paratransit, you're going to be calling 24 hours in advance. Or,
Yeah.
and what happens if it's raining and you don't want to go? Or it turns out to be, a sunny day. I don't know. That's, to me, part of living, and we should be able to, people should be able to do that. And it's elders, it's people that need to rely on that kind of paratransit, who just can't just jump onto a fixed route bus that easily.
Right. That's right.
Right, and another situation where you appreciate on-demand accessible transportation is when you're on vacation.
Definitely.
When Joe was talking about Washington, D.C., he was there for, business, very important business, but Washington, D.C. is a great place to visit, especially when you don't want to work because of, all the Smithsonian museums scattered throughout, and that's there's some good distances covered, but I know my wife Mary and I, we vacationed down in Fort Lauderdale and in Las Vegas, and we appreciate having accessible transportation there. I mean, Fort Lauderdale, they they have a fixed route bus system that because it's accessible, we would just hop on the bus to go to the other side of Fort Lauderdale. Because you know what? Who the hell wants to rent a car when most of the time it's just going to sit anyways? And depending what activities you're gauging in, you don't want to be driving a car that's not yours anyways.
And you're going to pay a lot for it.
Yeah.
Expensive.
I find that it's also important for those situations that just pop up. Like, for example, I took the Amtrak's Acela down to Washington, D.C. instead of flying and dealing with that. And when I got to Union Station, everything was great, and my plan was to take one of the metro. So I was heading down to the red line that they have, and going there, and the elevator's not working. The one elevator that I needed to go down prevented me from going onto the red line. So then next thing is like, usually what they do is they'll send a bus to take you to the next metro station to
Right.
go there. But they said that was going to take for a long time, and I was like, look, I just want to get to my hotel room. And so I grabbed an accessible taxi that was available. Boom. And so that worked out really well. And I
Yeah.
think, situations like that. And then on the way back from the hotel to Washington, to Union Station again, I called it, I looked on the internet and it said that their elevator was still out. So I ended up that's when I took the Uber taxi. Because there's just, again, it's great to have that for backups and
definitely.
for moving around. And everybody, nobody else would really worry about that. But if you're using
Right.
a chair and you need a wheelchair lift van, then you do worry.
Yeah, so is there resistance from the local RTA in Worcester to do this?
No, they're at the table with us, and just so, we were, when I say we, members of the Transportation Advisory Coalition, we talked to WRTA real early, saying that no, we're not looking to replace you. We're looking to be complementary. WRTA overall provides a great service. I mean, I'm a paratransit eligible customer, and they're sitting at the table with us because they're is it safe to say they're pretty much on board with trying to do a pilot program similar to like MBTA and
Yeah, I'd say they're definitely open to explore that.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on, again, what Uber and Lyft,
Right.
some of the more specifics that they want.
Yeah.
But right now, it's like trying to get Uber and Lyft to do this. Again, they're busy doing their own thing.
Yeah, of course.
It's not necessarily a moneymaker for them,
Right.
but for good PR, I think it's important for them to pursue things. I think it'll be tough for them to say, no, we don't want to do this right now, but, especially since they're not being accessible to people with disabilities.
Oh, right. Is Jonathan Church still the RTA administrator?
No.
He left.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
been gone for well over a year.
yeah.
So they had somebody else came in?
Yep.
Okay.
Dennis Lipka, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's been with
right.
WRTA, for a long time now. Jonathan actually took a position in a private sector.
Cool.
Yeah, but he was actually at the transportation conference, the 2-day conference that they had at the DCU Center.
Cool. So this new administrator is very proactive.
Yeah, a lot
That's
of
cool.
he's got a lot of new ideas. Well, he's got a lot of new ideas, but he's also been there for a while, and he's really knowledgeable on things. So the RTA just had a bunch of hearings. So one thing we've been doing is getting very involved in the RTA.
Good.
We've been attending their WRTA advisory board meetings. They're the ones that actually make the decisions on a regular basis, giving input that way. We've also have the TPAG meetings, which are basically geared for paratransit, older adults. And then there's a new one called the RAC, the Riders Advisory Coalition or Committee, and they basically take input from usually from the fixed bus routes and things like that,
Oh,
from
okay.
riders that way to give input. So we've been attending meetings with them concerning that. But recently, the WRTA has come up with a new schedule, routes that they're trying to do
good.
that are more efficient based on the input from riders and other efficiencies. So, that's something that Dennis has implemented, and some people are excited about those. And he's attended. He's working with the Council on Aging, which I think he's been in touch with several of them, trying to maybe expand their services to be more complementary
Good. Finally.
to like Worcester and everything
Yeah.
else, so people can move around and even open that up. So I'm very excited about that. I think that's a great resource. I
Yes.
mean, you know, I think there's some council on agings that centers that have vehicles that aren't used as much, is what I've heard, and especially like the hours. And so, if there's a possible way of increasing those hours, you know, getting out there to especially the towns where you don't have public transportation, you know, maybe opening it up, maybe even doing a little on-demand type of thing, you know, for the residents of the towns. I mean, that's a great option, you know,
I
for
agree.
work, for going to medical appointments. And our population is getting older too. It's not,
Yep.
you know, people like,
Absolutely.
you know, the focus is on, you know, people with disabilities, but, you know, I think it's on the elderly. I mean, more and more people are living in the community.
Yep.
You know, and more people are using scooters and
Yep.
wheelchairs or whatever else, or family members. And in the past, they were basically shut in,
Yep.
you know, but now people want to get out, and people are living longer, and sometimes they need to go for medical appointments. And so why shouldn't there be more accessible vehicles out there to be able to do that?
I
You know, for
agree.
families that want to have, you know, the older relatives join them in the family reunion things. So, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm living in Millbury. We're pretty fortunate there because, you know, they actually have a very active, you know, a couple lift-equipped vans that they use. And in
Okay.
fact, you know, just their regular COA transportation is probably like, you know, 8 to 3:30, but ADA eligible customers are able to access their services at, I think, from as early as 7:30 a.m. to like 5. You know, and they're specifically targeting people who work but rely on that kind of transportation.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
And just to add in, things change. I mean, I used to live in Shrewsbury, and I moved to Holden. When I moved to Holden, one of the locations, I mean, when I moved there, I knew that I was covered under the ADA. You know, basically, I was within 3/4 of a mile from
Yep.
a fixed route from
Right.
Worcester.
That's right.
Things change, and you know, Worcester cut back on its routes, and so I'm no longer covered that way. So I can't use a paratransit like I could have when I first moved there. So it's something else that people in towns need to think about too in
Right.
other areas, that, you know, if they change a bus route and all of a sudden you were able to get paratransit, and you may not be in the future. So it's something that changes. That's why it's great to have multiple choice on, you know, multiple options to be able to, you know, to use,
Yeah.
just for different situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
of emergencies, like when, you know, when I was the chair of it, like, God, it's been 14 years, 15 years, when we wanted to get accessible taxi cab, remember the battle with that?
Oh, yeah.
But my argument always has been, if a mother is a wheelchair user, and say she's a single mom, has a child has to go to the hospital overnight, well, guess what? Mama ain't getting on the ambulance. Mama, who's she gonna call?
Yeah. No,
The ambulance,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the only other way they're getting there, right? And that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. Or they'll call the Department of Social Service on her. But I'm saying people should have access to 24/7. A mother
Absolutely.
with a mobility impairment, or even a father or a grandparent taking care of a young,
yeah,
they should
or-
never have that fear.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, and like you know, Joe's talking about. I mean, with the you know, baby boomers and stuff. Well, let's just talk about Worcester. I mean, unless you've been in the cave for the last 3 years, I mean, Worcester is going through an incredible renaissance.
Absolutely.
You know what? So hey, if you can get a ride from one of your, if you have transportations from like any of the surrounding towns, you can just get dropped off somewhere in downtown Worcester, and you have access to all sorts of venues, great venues, whether it's you know, DCU Center, Hanover Theater, Mechanics Hall, then like restaurants everywhere.
Canal District. Look at how
Canal-
that's booming. And then, you know, again, with the Woo Sox or whatever they're going to call
Call 'em.
themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, that's that area is like exploding with new businesses. And
Oh,
things
yeah.
like that, which is exciting.
Oh, yeah,
Great for
yeah.
Worcester. But people need to be able to, you know, go there and travel there, and you know, and feel safe there, and
Yeah.
also go there outside of like regular fixed bus route hours. I mean,
Right.
you know, people may want to stay out to 12 o'clock or even
Yeah.
later. and maybe watch a. They're going to have different events. My understanding is different like outdoor events at
Yep.
that stadium as well. So
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What's that?
It's definitely a multi-use stadium, which,
Which would
yeah,
be nice.
yeah,
Right.
which it makes sense. I mean, use it. You have a resource, use it. Yeah, and so one of the things is that if you're able to get a on-demand transportation, that's one less car that's in the city trying to find a place to park.
Right.
And what the beauty about it is the Canal District, Shrewsbury Street, even Lower Highland Street, when
Yeah.
more Renaissance takes place there. There's going to be a lot of area of activity going on that you can participate in.
So why don't you do pilot, payment in lieu of taxes? You know how, like the pharmacy school plays for the Worcester Public Library to be open, I think, Sunday and Mondays.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Are the colleges part of this round table? Because you always talk about partnerships, right? And you have pilot, payment in lieu of taxes.
Yeah.
But I'm just a suggestion, maybe, one of those rich colleges that have million-dollar endowments.
So some of the colleges have relationships with like Uber and Lyft.
Yes,
I
like
think there was an
Assumption
article,
College.
Assumption, right.
Assumption does.
Right, they would give students discounts to
Yes.
travel and things. So I think some of that's already been done, but none of them are accessible that I know of. And so what about if you have a student who uses a wheelchair? They're not able to do that?
Right.
I'm not sure what happens, what the college does with that.
Well, get them part of the table. Say, hey,
But
pay for that.
But the other interesting thing is, and something that we're exploring is that, so we almost have 1 million on-demand rides, right? Each ride gets charged 20 cents per ride.
Okay.
And so last year, I don't know what the total was, like 700,000 rides, and the city of Worcester got something like $80,000 because part of that 20 cents is for the cities and towns, or at least the cities that are affected by Uber and going in there and everything. That's an arrangement that the state did. But then the other 10%, the other half is supposed to go to either like the taxi industry or be available for things. And my thought is, why isn't that being available for accessible transit to help defray the cost? Because I think it does cost, and we've talked to different people, even taxis companies, who say, yeah, it costs more to have an accessible vehicle and a driver helping somebody using a wheelchair to get inside. And it takes like twice as long, costs, and so they should be subsidized. Boston right now is actually subsidizing Uber vehicles, $34 for every active hour they're out. So in addition to what you're doing, if you have an accessible Uber in Boston and you're signed up for this, you're going to get $34 on top of whatever fares and everything you collect, which is great. And I think they're tapping into some of that money that's out there. So
That's cool.
I want to make sure that Worcester, in our area towns, have access to that if that's something that we can do, because that sounds like there needs to be some sort of subsidy to support the accessible vehicles, and it should be coming from somewhere.
Well, you get it on your phone tax, cell phone tax.
The phone, right? Phone's a great example. Again, if people who are deaf use
Yeah.
the relay service and things like that, right? And there are specialized equipment for other types of disabilities, low vision, things like that. So why aren't we doing the same thing with that for accessible transit? And so people, again, it's for the whole community. Make it all accessible for people.
Yeah. Do you have any politicians on board with this?
We actually talk to the legislators quite a bit on things. We
Good.
support, for example, Senator Harry Chandler just came out with an amendment supporting $90.5 million for the regional transit authorities, and that's something that we've been supporting.
Good.
With our advocates and things like that, and we've been monitoring. We've worked with Senator Moore and Representative O'Day and different other folks. Representative Kane, have been involved, and she was on the task force, for example. And so we've attended those meetings and testified there. So I think we're pretty active, and I really, I appreciate what our local
Good.
area legislators are doing. It's tough, though, because you're going, the MBTA is spending, billion plus, whatever, you know, and we're getting only 90.5 million for the rest of the state. So, yeah,
It's pretty political.
Yep.
it's, you know, yeah.
And back to what you were talking about before about subsidies. Remember, you know, how we got our accessible taxis? It was, you know, you provide the accessible vehicle.
Right.
We'll give you a medallion.
Yes, yes.
You know, and at that time, the medallion, if I remember right, was worth $75,000.
Yes,
but
very
this
expensive.
is before all these livery services. It's definitely way before Uber and Lyft. But yeah, there's definitely. I agree that you know, providing some kind of financial incentive.
Absolutely.
We do know that the Yellow Cab Company is working with the WRTA actually on a grant to actually get some accessible
Central Mass
vehicles.
Regional Planning
Yep.
Commission, I think, has put a grant in for like 6 accessible
Oh, excuse
taxis
me, that's
and
right.
stuff.
CMRPC.
I'm not sure what the status on that is, but I mean, again, they've been part of our group, been meeting with us and taking input. So,
Well, we're out of time.
wow.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Well, I thank Mike Kennedy and Joe Miller for coming on my 20th anniversary show to talk about transportation.
It's been great.
Thank
Yeah.
you for coming on.
And
Thanks, Robbin.
thanks for having us.
Good night. I think we went 15 seconds over.